you to come away with a clear understanding of how the unconscious mind subtly and sometimes, well, quite powerfully shapes your thoughts, feelings, and daily behaviors, often in ways that might completely surprise you.
It really can be surprising.
Okay, so where do we even begin with this map?
Hey, double triple. All right, I don't know. I don't know if that's Twitch or me or what the problem is. But howdy. This is Double Triple Channel. I'm Ron. I'm in New Hampshire, surrounded by forests, wild animals, and technical problems. it's a lot of fun. I stream science and animals and all kinds of stuff. And today I'm going to talk about the unconscious mind. Maybe. We'll see. Maybe it's just that opening that is not working. I'm not really sure. It seems like, I don't know. I think I'm getting some audio on this regular screen here. All right, that seems okay. And then when I run this guy here,
Massive topic. It feels huge.
Well, I think a really insightful starting point is to look at the intellectual groundwork.
well, that's not gonna going to have any problems anyway, because it's just one thing. It's like a podcast or something. I don't know. We'll try this. We'll see if we can get it to work. But before we get going, I did want to follow up on something yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, whenever. When was my last stream? Whenever my last stream was. What was it? What's today? Today's Wednesday. The other one was, I forget what day it was. Here, let me look it up here. Twitch. Here, we'll look it up and we'll figure it out together here. Is that it? There we go. Okay. So here's my screen manager here. Let's see. I go over here and I go to my channel, and hopefully it'll tell me when my last stream was. So my last stream is still yeah, we still got audio. Good. Yeah, here's my last. Oh, this isn't my last stream. I got to come up here and say videos. Videos. There we go. Did that do it? Okay. Double triple. Yeah, that looks like my thing. Okay. There's that goddamn question mark again. Amazing. There it was. Okay, so this was yesterday. Yeah, it says yesterday. God, it seems like just yesterday. All right, well. Oh, I know what it was. It was early in the morning yesterday. That's what it was. That's why it seems like it's more than a day ago. So, in that stream, I was talking about Twitch technical problems. Maybe that's when. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're going to mess me up here. I don't know. Anyway, I was talking about this big question mark that shows up when you go to video, and it was because they made some change to their website, and people who didn't have, the bleeding edge browser loaded on their machine got this question mark. And I fixed it by changing the has pseudo selector, enabling the has pseudo selector on my browser. But I had another browser, a Chrome browser, that did not have that. So I just left it. I didn't, I wasn't going to go, wasted a bunch of my time trying to track down a Twitch problem. But then I just checked again today, and they fixed it. They fixed the problem. So apparently enough people complained or whatever, they decided to maybe backtrack to an old version. Who knows what they did. But they fixed it. It works now on on both of my browsers, which are, I don't know how old they are, but they're not the newest one, but they're not ancient either. But it works on both of my browsers now, so apparently they fixed the problem. Enough people complained or whatever, and they fixed it. So that's good. And I think my website is still working. Let's see if my website is still working. Yeah, there we go. There's my website. Let's see if it plays, just for kicks. And the different stories. Yeah. So it makes it a little bit kind of complicated. So that's cool. Okay, so I got my website's working, their website's working, but I just, for some reason, I couldn't get my stream started there. But now it's working. All right, so we're all set. But I want to talk about my unconscious and just unconscious generally. The other day I was talking on, who was it? Shane McGinnis, the history guy. He had a super duper event where he had like 3 long streams in a row where he invited a bunch of his friends to come on and talk with him. And one of the guys that he talked to, a guy named Tommy, who is an expert on philosophy and philosophy of the mind and consciousness and all that kind of stuff. So I asked him about this. Let me back up a little bit more. Have you ever had this situation where you have a problem, you can't figure out how to fix the problem, and you can't work over it, and people say, well, sleep on it and maybe you'll figure it out, and you do, and it works. You go to sleep, you wake up, and you get the solution as soon as you wake up. That happens, right? So how does that happen? It happens because your unconscious mind is working on it while you're sleeping, even though you're not conscious about that your mind is working on it. Your mind is working on it. And so I thought years ago, well, that's kind of cool. Maybe I could direct that, or maybe I could make that happen more reliably, or just rather than just hoping that you get the answer or whatever. And so I started doing that, and I would, if I had a problem that was just really, a situation or something I was trying to figure out that I just couldn't, my conscious mind wasn't able to get it, then right before I go to sleep, I'd say, okay, think about it while you're sleeping. I'd tell myself to sleep about it. Actually direct my unconscious, right before I go to sleep. And it works. It worked more reliably that way. And I would wake up and I'd have the answer. And then it got to the point where I could, as I was waking up, I'd remember the dream, and then I could kind of remember parts of how my unconscious was figuring it out, and things like that. Anyway, it turns out you can train your brain, your conscious brain to kind of halfway communicate with your unconscious brain, or figure out what it's doing, and vice versa. Although I think your subconscious brain or your unconscious brain is kind of aware of what's going on all the time anyway. But anyway, that was something that was kind of cool. And then I learned that I could your unconscious brain has like a clock. You have all kinds of rhythms and clocks in your brain, right, that are pretty reliable and pretty accurate. And I noticed something years ago that I could do if I wasn't paying attention to something. Like if I start something in the microwave, or in the in the kitchen or something like that, cooking, and then I go do something. Like a few seconds before the bell would go off in the kitchen, I would stop and I'd say, "Oh, it's done," And it's like my brain was timing. My brain was timing the thing. My unconscious brain was timing it without me knowing it. And it was pretty accurate. I could do it pretty accurately. Anyway, what I figured out was that I could use that as an alarm clock. And when I sleep, I'd go to sleep and I'd figure out what, before I go to sleep, I'd figure out what time I need to wake up. And then I'd go to sleep. And my unconscious brain, it's got these rhythms and stuff that are very accurate. And it would time it for me. And then when it's time for me to wake up, my unconscious brain would wake me up. And it worked. It worked pretty reliably, unless I was just like totally dead of the world or something, and I needed to sleep more than I needed to wake up or whatever. And something I noticed was that the way that my unconscious brain would wake me up, it would do it during REM sleep, right? You don't want to wake up during deep sleep because that's really messed up. You want to wake up in REM sleep. You get in REM sleep, and then you kind of gradually wake up out of REM sleep. And also I had a machine that I guess I should explain that too. I had a machine that could measure my brain waves. I forgot about that. Yeah, I had this machine that could measure my brain waves, and so I hooked my brain up to it when I was sleeping, and I could figure out more stuff. Anyway, so I figured out that the way my brain was waking me up, my little internal alarm clock was working, is that as I was dreaming, it would direct the dream to something that was uncomfortable, or you know what I mean? Not quite nightmare stuff, but close to it. It would be something that would just be, maybe there'd be some danger in my dream, or something that was just, that would be, and it would cause me to wake up, because I imagine, evolution-wise, you needed some way to wake up if there really was danger, right? If if the saber-toothed tiger was roaring or whatever next to you or whatever, you'd want to be able to wake up, right? And you'd want to be able to distinguish between, a saber-toothed tiger and a something else that was making noise. You know what I mean? So, anyway, so that's what my unconscious brain would do. It would, during my REM sleep, my dream cycle, if it was time for me to wake up, it would direct my dream into something that was, uncomfortable or dangerous or whatever, and it would wake me up. Like for example, it's just a couple weeks ago, I had to wake up, do something, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, I figured it out, and what it was is I went to sleep. I had a mid-morning nap, right? I was going to take a mid-morning nap. And I said, okay, I got to wake up. And I figured out that I had to wake up at 10 o'clock in order to hop in the shower and be able to do my thing, right? So I went to sleep, I don't know, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever in the morning to take a little nap. I wake up pretty early, by the way. I was up in the morning at like 3:30 or 4 or whatever. And I said, okay, I'm going to take a nap before I go do this thing that I got to do. But I got to wake up at 10 o'clock, okay? And so I said, okay, unconscious mind, make sure you wake me up at 10 o'clock. So I go to sleep, and what it did was I was dreaming about, who knows what it was, but, when you're dreaming, what the dreams are is your brain is consolidating all your episodic memory that you had during the day, that's stored in your context window for the day, and then it processes it and lays it down and actually, does the learning part into your neural net while you're during REM, right? So all the stuff that you saw during the day is kind of temporarily stored, and then when you go to sleep, it really interweaves it into your neural net while you're sleeping, so that it's more accessible and stuff like that. So that day, or maybe it was the day, no, yeah, it must have been the day before or whatever, I saw, I was driving down the freeway, and how every once in a while you'll see, as you're driving down the freeway, you'll see like a torn up tire or something on the side of the road. You ever see that? Where you're driving down the freeway or the highway, and off to the side of the road is this tire all torn up, on the side of the road. And you're like, what the heck is that about, And it's pretty often that you see it, right? I see it kind of often. Anyway, that happened. I was driving down the road, but this tire was like right in the middle of the road, and it looked new. It looked, right in the middle of the road, and it looked like a new tire and everything. And just like another half mile or whatever, there's a truck driver off to the side of the road looking at his truck, and apparently he had just lost that tire. And so I thought about that, and anyway, so that was in my mind, Wow, I thought, God, that was kind of a dangerous thing. Guys loses his tire on a big truck like that. And then the same evening, I was watching videos or something and saw another thing very similar. Somebody's tire got torn up or something on a car in a video, I thought, God, that's quite a coincidence, that I saw it in person and then I saw something on a video. So that was in my mind, right? That was in my episodic memory, and it was something that was kind of more prominent than just, whatever you'd ordinarily see, So when I went to sleep, my brain was processing. That was part of the stuff that my brain was processing. And it brought that up. And it was, as I was sleeping, and what it did, it progressively made it worse. First it just kind of talked, had that kind of image. And then it was like, okay, I'm riding in the car now, right? I'm riding in the car, and I get out of the car, and it's torn up, which is another step up, more dangerous, right? In terms of, if you witness somebody else, something happened to somebody else that way, okay, that's dangerous. You recognize it as dangerous. But if it happens when you're in the car, then whoa, I was at risk. That was kind of scary, right? And it continually stepped up these things until it got to one that was, I can't remember what it was. Oh God, what was it? I don't remember what it was, but it just kept stepping these things up, and eventually it got to one that was enough that it woke me up. It was disturbing enough that it woke me up, and I looked at the clock, and it was like, okay, it's 10 o'clock. It's time for me to wake up. It was trying to wake me up, and that's how it did it, and that's how it does it. So, if you want to train yourself how to have an internal, an alarm clock so you don't have to set the alarm clock, so you can wake it up yourself. That's a way to do it. But anyway, that's just one of the things where my unconscious brain is communicating to me. Before I go to bed, I can communicate to my unconscious brain, okay, wake me up at this time. And then while I'm sleeping, my unconscious brain is trying to communicate to me and trying to get my conscious brain to do something, wake up, right? So, anyway, I mentioned this on my last stream. I said that, what was it? I asked, I don't remember what I asked my brain to figure out, but I woke up in the morning, and normally what I get is just images like that, an image of a tire torn up or whatever it is, it's just kind of images. I wake up, and it's like it's ordinary stuff, like when you wake up, sometimes you remember your dream, right? And you remember maybe the last thing that you dreamt or whatever, Sometimes you can remember a whole long sequence. Sometimes all you remember is just the last thing. And anyway, that's kind of how I try to get the, if my brain is working on a problem, sometimes I can see that. I can see that the last thing that it dreamt was about this problem. And anyway, that's just how it works. That's how I was communicating with it. But I had never had it, had any verbal stuff. It's always been images, But then the other day, something happened, and I got an image, but then right as I was waking up, because while you're sleeping, normally your verbal center is not working. Sometimes people talk in their sleep, but it's unusual, right? So I woke up and there was a verbal thing. And then the thought was that my subconscious was calling me its clerk. That's the message I got, when I woke up. And it's not like hearing things in my head. No. I may be crazy, but that's what it was. It's normal stuff, when you wake up You remember your dream, and what I remembered was my unconscious brain was calling me clerk. I'm its clerk. That's kind of weird, you know. And so I thought, what the heck is this about? You know, why is this, you know? And it makes sense because you know, I most of what we process, 90, who knows what it is, 90%, 95, I don't know what it is, of what your brain is doing is unconscious. It's not part of the conscious. So you know, your unconscious brain is just a little sliver of what goes on. Is this? I think my thing is out of sync here. Let me check this real quick. Oh yeah, that's way out. Let me try something here. Yeah, that's way off. God damn it. All right, so let's see. The audio is coming a little too soon, I think, is what was going on. All right, let's try that. No, that's still not in sync. All right, try again. Yeah, it still seems like it's out of sync. Yeah, the audio is just a little bit too fast there. Well, that's a little bit better. How does my voice look? It's still a little bit off, isn't it? All right, that, you know, that's close enough. All right, so yeah, your mind is like 90% or 90 whatever, 90 some 98% or whatever it is. It's mostly unconscious, you know. You don't have to think about walking. You don't have to think about. I mean, when you're talking, all you have to think about is what you want to say, and the words kind of show up. You know, you don't have to think about, oh, I got to say this word now, and then I got to say this word and this word. You know, it just kind of flows, right? And you don't have to even think about how to say the words. You don't have to think about how to shape your mouth and your tongue and all the phonemes. You know, not all that's all handled automatically. Your breathing's automatic. When you walk, it's automatic. You know, a lot of things are automatic. And you can and you can this procedural memory. You can even train yourself to put into your unconscious, right? You know, when you first learn how to ride a bicycle or throw a baseball or whatever, you know, it's first it's conscious and you train it and then it gets to be unconscious. So most of what your brain's doing is unconscious. And so I just thought that was kind of weird that would. A couple things. First of all, I mean, I may be just interpreting it wrong, right? Which is likely, right? That's probably what's going on. But if it is true, if my subconscious was saying that to me, was saying that I'm its clerk, it kind of makes sense, right? Because if your unconscious brain is doing most of the work and your consciousness is only this little sliver of what is actually going on in your brain, then that model of what's going on, it makes a little sense that your unconscious brain is in charge. and it's doing everything. It's doing, it's doing your breathing, it's doing your this, and it's doing all these things simultaneously, allowing you to talk, doing all this stuff, and your conscious brain is just doing, a few, rational thoughts, and maybe helping to interpret things real time, sensory data a little bit, and that kind of thing. Trying to do conscious calculation and maybe plan some things, or something, whatever, And it's kind of like just a task and just another one of these tasks that your unconscious brain has to do. And they figured out, certain areas of the brain do certain things, right? You get your Wernicke's area and your Broca's area that help you with speech, and you got something in your brainstem or whatever, your cerebellum or who knows where it is that control your walking and your breathing and all this stuff, right? It's all, and it's like your unconscious brain has all these different sections and functions that it works with and controls, right? And maybe your conscious brain is just one of those things. Because when people they've done tests and stuff where how people decide things, and it's mostly unconscious. It's even though they think that they're deciding things consciously, most of the way it works is your unconscious brain makes the decision, and then your conscious brain kind of rationalizes how backwards, back fills in. It's like if somebody says, "Oh, how did why did you decide that?" Or like, why did you decide to eat tacos for dinner? Why did you do that? Why? And you try, and then so you try, and so if somebody actually asks you that and you try to explain it, it's not a decision that was made consciously, right? It's an unconscious decision. It's not something that you went said, here are the pluses, here are the minuses of having tacos for dinner. You know what I mean? You didn't do it that way. But if somebody asks you, you say, "Oh, well, I haven't had tacos for a while," and you'll come up with some rationalization to kind of backfill in, to make yourself feel as if it was a rational decision, and it wasn't something that was just happened just in your unconscious. And they found out that a lot of things are like that. And there's some study that happened a few years ago where they could actually measure this. Where they could ask people to consciously, I can't remember the name of what it was. Anyway, what they found out was that they were measuring unconscious impulses of this task or this perception or something, and they were measuring the conscious portion of it, and the unconscious was happening a few milliseconds before the conscious part of it. You know what I mean? Which is just amazing. I can't remember if it was a task where they had to push something, but it was a decision type thing, right? It was something where they had to make a decision about something, and it turned out that the unconscious brain was making the decision first, and then there was a few milliseconds later the conscious brain was registering it, which is like, wow, that's. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe the unconscious brain is what really makes us do stuff. And a lot of things like eating, people who have eating disorders or just eat too much and get fat and stuff. I mean, if you think about it, right? If you think about people who are morbidly obese, and it's like, obviously, if they consciously could control that, they would, right? They wouldn't want to be that way. They wouldn't want to be morbidly obese. And if they could consciously control what they eat, they would. They would stop eating. They would eat the right things, or whatever. So it's kind of. I mean, it's years ago, we used to, uh, deride people who were overweight. It's like there was some defect, moral defect or something, or they didn't have, whatever. But now we realize, it's unconscious. It's an unconscious thing. When you see all these ads all the time, with food, they have all these ads, these Taco Bell commercials that are running on. Oh shit! I should check and see if they're running ads on my thing. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, all these like Taco Bell ads and stuff that they've been running, and then they ring the little bell. It's like a Pavlovian thing. They do this. They show all this food, and then bing, they do this bell. And it's like, oh, it's time to eat. It's disgusting. And even though consciously, even though I just tell you this, right? And if you knew exactly what they were doing, you knew exactly the techniques that they're using. They're ringing this bell. They're doing this Pavlovian thing where they show you the food, they ring the bell, all that stuff, and you knew exactly the techniques that they were using and how they did it and everything. It would still get to your unconscious brain. You couldn't stop it consciously. You know what I'm saying? If you have two groups of people and one of them sees these Taco Bell commercials every 15 minutes and the other group sees some benign commercial every 15 minutes, and you do a test with them, the group that sees the Taco Bell commercials, 6 months later, they're going to weigh 20 pounds more. You know what I mean? See what I'm saying? And even if you told that group, even if you said, okay, we're doing this test, we're going to show you these ads to try to make you fat, it would still make them fat. They would, you know what I'm saying? There's nothing they could do about it. It's an unconscious thing. So, yeah, it's not. We should have. I think we should have content warnings or something for this. For food ads, there should be, and people should be able to opt out of it and everything. And especially people who have, eating disorders or whatever it is, they should be able to opt out, I think. We're at 35 minutes. Oh yeah, my ad manager is not running right here. 35 minutes. So yeah, it looks like I might be coming to an ad action a little bit. I'm not really sure. Yeah. All right. Yeah. There's nothing I can really do about that. It's just not set up correctly here for me to be able to tell when the ads are coming. So sorry about that, guys. We're just gonna have to. I have this little tool that I bring up here that's supposed to tell me when the ads are running, and it's not running. It's not even working. So, all right, I'll forget that. So yeah, you're unconscious, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's. And so anyway, I thought about that, and yeah, my conscious brain is just a clerk for my unconscious brain. That's how it works. I think I think that's a good model. Anyway, I brought it up at this stream. Shane had this stream with this guy named Tommy, who was an expert in that, and I brought it up and I typed in. I said, "Oh, is it possible that our conscious brain is just a clerk for unconscious brain?" And his reaction seemed to indicate that it was a new thing, that people hadn't really thought about that. But I did a little research after that, and the people do. I mean, it is realized that there's an unconscious brain, and it does stuff in the background, and it controls things to some extent, more or less. But I think the model that the unconscious brain is who you are, is your mind, and the conscious part is just a little bit of a task that the unconscious brain uses. It's just a clerk. Your conscious is just a clerk for your unconscious brain. But then it comes up with it raises the question: okay, does your unconscious brain uh, actually have a subconscious. I mean, actually have a subjective consciousness that we're just not aware of. Because, as I said, when I woke up, I had this little, there was an image and in this little word clerk, that my unconscious brain was telling me something. So how could it do that? How could it formulate that? How could it, do these things? They're like waking me up, that little alarm clock technique that I was talking about. My unconscious brain must be figuring it out, right? It knows it's got its internal rhythms. It's figuring out what time it is, and it's directing my dreams and causing me to wake up, right? How it's got to have some kind of mechanism. There's got to be some sort of consciousness, right? We're just our own conscious brains. This little teeny sliver part is just unaware of. So, and then what does that do? What are the philosophical implications of that? Wow. What if our unconscious mind is conscious, does have a consciousness that we're just not aware of? And there are so many other things like when you're talking to somebody, all these verbal cues and stuff that happens below the surface when you're talking to somebody, or the chemistry you have with somebody, or all that. I mean, that's all unconscious, or sometimes it's conscious, but a lot of times it's not, right? So if you're talking to somebody and you're communicating with them, you're communicating with them on a conscious level, but there are all these unconscious things going on, all these cues that you're seeing, back and forth, and sometimes you're conscious of it, but a lot of times you're not. I'm neuro D, so I gotta. I kind of have to do that through my conscious brain, I think. I get some of it maybe unconsciously, but most of it I gotta see. I have to consciously see it and recognize it. I go, okay, let's see a person do this. Then I have to. It's not something I just unconsciously get. I have to see. Oh, they're folding their hands. That means they're impatient, angry, upset, whatever it is. They want, they're done with the conversation, whatever. I have to try to figure that out consciously. But I'm guessing most, neurotypical people, that's kind of natural stuff. They just understand that. And voice intonation, all these things, right, are all things that are communicated back and between people, and sometimes you can consciously notice that, and sometimes you don't. But if it is a communication that is happening, who's communicating? I mean, what I'm saying? Who's communicating? Is it then maybe their unconscious is communicating to your unconscious? They may not be conscious of what they're doing, and your conscious may not be conscious of what's going on, but their unconscious is sending that message. They're doing this. Right? They probably don't notice that. You don't notice where your hands are, your legs are, and all this kind of stuff while you're talking, right? But your unconscious does. Your unconscious is the one that did that, right? Somebody told your arms to fold like that while you're talking, right? It's your unconscious brain, right? And in the other person, maybe they see that consciously, or maybe they're busy and thinking about something else. They don't see it, but their unconscious gets it. So it could be that our unconscious brain, you're talking to somebody, your unconscious brain is talking to their unconscious brain is seeing it, and neither one of your conscious brains are aware that your unconscious brains are talking to each other. So that's just, it just blows me away. God, is that a whole new model? Maybe that's a whole new model of what humanity's all about. an ad might be starting. I don't know. It says ad starting soon, but I don't know if it's 43 minutes. I don't know if that's true or not. So sorry if you get hit with an ad. You can watch it on the VOD. But isn't that interesting? That I mean, that's just that's so interesting. You know that your unconscious brain could be talking to somebody else's unconscious brain with neither of those two people consciously knowing that it's going on at all. You know. So that might be another a model to model this whole brain, you know, the way our brains work, the way our minds are structured, you know, if to just view it as that way, as there's an unconscious part of your brain that is really running the show, you know, that's really doing things, that is really telling what to do, and your conscious brain is just this little sliver that maybe is aware of some of it, maybe, you know, and isn't, or and performs this specialized function for your unconscious brain as a clerk, you know. So that's that just if you I don't know where that goes, but there you can see there's so many different implications to that, philosophical implications to modeling the human brain that way as being primarily this unconscious thing that we can't see or that we don't see very much of. But it has its own subjective consciousness. And it's probably, I mean, we get glimpses of it while we're sleeping, and the glimpses that we do get are pretty bizarre, right? You know, dreams are not usually don't seem very realistic. You know, there are all kinds of things that go on and in our dreams that are quite different. So I can imagine that you know, this unconscious part of our brains works quite differently than what our conscious brain does, and maybe it's much more intelligent than what our conscious brain is. You know, because that you know, like going back to what at the beginning when I was talking about how we can sleep on something and wake up and the answer is there, you know, but our conscious brain, no matter how hard we worked on it, we couldn't figure it out, but somehow our unconscious brain figured it out while we were sleeping and when we wake up. So that's kind of a clue, that's an indication that, wow, maybe our unconscious brains are much more intelligent or creative or whatever than our conscious brains are, which is another data point for that model, right? another more support for that model that our unconscious brain is actually the one that's running the show. That our unconscious brains are the ones that's actually you know, doing everything, and our consciousness is just this little sliver, just this little puny thing, you know. And you know, there's it appears that there's less of a filter between unconscious. You know, and advertisers take advantage of it, like I was just telling you about the Taco Bell commercials, right? They know all this stuff. They know if they do these things, they can get into your unconscious brain and make you do things without you being able to filter out, you know, with your conscious brain. So, and propagandists are starting to get like that, and it's right. We got somebody who thinks they're president right now, who uses those techniques too, you know, and you know, just I don't know. This is gonna get kind of dark here, but you know, when we had this COVID thing, they were able to get a huge portion of the population convinced for one reason or another that they shouldn't wear a mask, during the COVID thing. And they did that by using all these propaganda techniques. And this isn't like your father's propaganda, This is like propaganda on steroids, This is like it was the public health leadership that did it. They have access to all of the research, all of this brain research on how the unconscious works, how the subconscious works, how we make decisions, how they have access to all of that information, all of that research that's done that way, and they used it. They used it to convince people not to wear masks. First they got the president to do it, and all his lackeys went along with that. And one of the techniques is they try to make people feel embarrassed or different or an outcast or whatever if they do this thing. They try to make you think that, wearing a mask is whatever. They do it linguistically. They do it by showing people. It's like they'll show somebody wearing a mask, and then they'll make fun of them, right? On a show, say, or something, on a news show, on any what kind of show, right? They show somebody wearing a mask, and then 3 other people make fun of that person wearing the mask, right, on this video, right, or on the show or whatever, right? Then all the audience that's watching that, they see that, and they say, "Oh, that guy's." That guy's getting socially reprimanded for wearing a mask. I better not wear a mask. And it's just maybe those 4 people are the only ones who think that way. But because they've got this huge microphone that they can, they can blast that out to a bunch of people. And it's one of those things where you don't even see that consciously. Maybe it's something that's communicated unconsciously. And so all these people who saw that video see that the person wearing a mask got socially reprimanded or whatever, but they just got it unconsciously, and then they kind of backfill it in, right, rationally. Okay, why would that person get why would the people get on that person for wearing the mask? When they do it in the video, right? Here's the situation. Okay, they got a video. They got 3 people not wearing a mask, 1 person wearing a mask. The 3 people who are not wearing a mask make fun of the person who's wearing a mask, and they do it subtly, very subtly, where you can, where it's barely conscious. Then the audience sees that, and they say, "Oh, that person got socially reprimanded for wearing a mask," and maybe they just only think that, unconsciously. But it's never explained why those people would be on that person. You know what I'm saying? Why would those 3 people be, socially ostracize that person for wearing a mask? It's never explained. They never explain why that would be. So the audience sees that, and sees that the person is being ostracized for wearing a mask, and then but there's no reason given, so the person's own mind has to fill in the gaps, right? Why would that person? And then everybody figures out their own delusion as to why that person would be ostracized for wearing a mask, But they don't say what it is. They don't. Nobody ever says it consciously. And if you ask somebody today, one of these, like one of the MAGA people, who are super. Who really get upset at people for wearing masks. If you went up and asked them and said, "Why are you upset with that person for wearing a mask?" they couldn't tell you. They don't know. They wouldn't know. All they know is that everybody else is doing it, and they don't want to be the one that gets ostracized. So they, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, and the reason why they did that, the reason why they went through that whole thing, and the reason why they tried to get people thinking negatively about wearing masks is so more people would get sick. because they wanted more people to get sick. For those who are not familiar with my stream, every stream I explain this, that an N95 mask is the most effective way to prevent COVID and many other diseases and influenza, and it's effective against measles and RSV and all kinds of things. It's closest thing to a silver bullet in terms of health that there is, right? Is wearing an N95 mask. And so people who make a lot of money off of sick people being sick, they don't want people to wear masks. And that's why our leadership killed over 1 million of our own citizens here, because they wanted to make money off of people being sick. And that's how they did it, is they demonized mask wearing, and they didn't, if you like, I watch C-SPAN a lot, and maybe once every few months they'll have a doctor on, right? And they never tell you to wear a mask. They never tell you to wear an N95 mask. Or if they do say wear a mask, they say, oh, by the way, wash your hands and stand 6. Oh, and then you can wear a mask, wear a cloth mask, or wear, whatever kind of mask you want. Sometimes maybe, I don't know, and they just blur it. They don't explain. If they mention it at all. I think the last 3 or 4 times that I've seen a doctor on C-SPAN talking about stuff, they did not bring up the mask at all. They did not bring up N95 masks as a way to prevent disease at all. So anyway, so that was all. That's just a way that they did that. It was a propaganda technique, and they've got all kinds of propaganda techniques that they use, and that's why, like all these MAGA people, they don't know. If you ask them to try to explain why they feel a certain way or whatever, what their position is or anything, they either change the subject, they can't understand, they don't know why, or they'll come up with a reason that is just absolutely contrary to fact. You know what I mean? They'll say, you ask them, why is Trump great? Oh, he's great because he's great. He's the greatest leader ever. Why? Why do you think that? They don't know. They can't figure it out because they've been programmed unconsciously. Because there's no reason to it. It's been programmed into them unconsciously through these, probably through Fox or whoever, and so that's kind of a problem. And it kind of drives home the point that it's our unconscious brain is probably the one that's doing everything. The problem is that our unconscious brain has no filter. The stuff just can be poured into people's unconscious brain without them being able to filter it or even rationally determine whether it's correct or not. Because it didn't go through this little conscious part of the brain that had that, and that's one of the tasks of this conscious part of our brain, right? Is to figure out if something really makes sense or not. So anyway, so I just thought that was kind of a cool thing. I thought it was just a new model or a new way to look at it, and the fact that the propagandists or whoever wants to lead people around by the nose can exploit that and can if they understand these simple techniques on how to get pour this bullshit into people's unconscious brain, they can do that, and it just it's kind of a problem. And it's contagious too, Somebody, it gets into, they could pour it in, one of the, you pour in this mixture, and at the end of the mixture it says, oh, by the way, reproduce yourself and spread. That's part of the message, and and people can just unconsciously spread this bullshit to other people, unconsciously. So it's just a huge problem. I don't know. I don't know if and even making it conscious, even thinking about it and making it conscious that you can't stop it. That's the insidious part of it. So, what I do is like I don't watch mainstream media. I don't watch whenever the orange guy comes on the screen. I turn the channel. I don't watch it at all. It's I just I don't listen to anything that he says at all, ever. If somebody puts up a tweet that he did, I blank it out. I turn the channel. I don't listen to a single word the guy says at all, because it doesn't matter what he says, right? 3/4 of what he says is not true. So why would I want to listen to that? And it's designed in order to manipulate people, and it manipulates people, even people who think that they can't be manipulated. They get manipulated anyway. I see all these streamers. You go to the talk shows and politics, whatever, streamer section on Twitch, and look at all these people. They're all parroting what the mainstream media is, what the billionaires and the the duck is saying. they're all parroting it, and they're all putting out his message all the time, constantly. It's like there's not an original thought in their brains. I don't know. I don't want to diss people that way, but you know what I'm saying. It's like they're all just parroting what the billionaires and what the media is saying. It's just crazy. And if you talk to them, and I'm sure they honestly believe that they're saying that they're coming up with their own stuff, and these are original thoughts, and it's what they really want, and all this, But I don't know. Try it. Try not watching mainstream media at all for a few months. No mainstream media. Don't listen to what any politicians say or anything. Don't watch any commercials. Don't watch anything like that. Maybe watch, your favorite streamer put puzzles together or whatever. Do that for 3 months, and then come back, and you'll just be shocked at how programmed people are, and how and they all think that they're not programmed. They all think that they're these are all their own ideas, or that they're that what they're thinking makes sense, and all this. You know what I mean? It's amazing what's going on. Anyway, so yeah, unconscious brain. I think we should. I think that's a model that we can have. How a model, a way of looking at how the mind works. It's just thinking that the unconscious brain is really the one that's running the show, that's doing everything, and that the conscious brain is just another task that helps. That assists, that's a clerk. That's a clerk for the unconscious brain. Let me. I was going to try to see if I could run a video. Let me run this video here that I had. I think I did this when I was. Let's see. Let me bring this up here. All right.
That moment when you just feel like something's the right. That moment when you just feel like something's the right decision, or you have a hunch about something, even if you can't quite put your finger on why.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's this whole engine running under the hood of our awareness. Ever stop to wonder, what exactly is going on beneath the surface of your consciousness?
That intuitive pull you're describing. Yeah, that really gets to the core of what we're exploring today. Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive.
Right.
And today we're taking a plunge into the fascinating, really intricate world of the unconscious mind. You've provided a fantastic set of materials here.
So they were useful.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll play the thing. I'll play this little thing. And actually, I think what I'll do is I'll skip the first part of it. I got to back this up a little bit because I want to show that this is actually a all right, let me run this here. There it is. Okay, yeah, this guy is releasing this through Creative Commons, and I actually asked him. This is AI, right? This is AI that's speaking. It's pretty obvious. It's two AI. It's an AI that's doing these two different voices. And I asked the guy, and it's actually written by AI too. But I guess he picks the sources, but otherwise just tells the AI to write this thing and to produce the, do this podcast type thing.
You know that moment when you just feel like
that's where
something's
this
the right.
comes from.
You know that moment when you just feel like
And
something's the right
it's
decision,
Creative Commons,
or,
so I can reproduce it here.
You have
No
a hunch
problem.
about something, even if you can't quite put your finger on why. It's like there's this whole engine running under the hood of our awareness. Ever stop to wonder, what exactly is going on beneath the surface of your consciousness?
That intuitive pull you're describing. Yeah, that really gets to the...
Yeah. All right, so in the beginning of this thing, they talk about Freud and the collective unconscious with Jung, and a lot of old stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'll skip that part of it. I'll play the intro here a little bit, but then we'll skip over that and we'll get to the other part that's more modern research and stuff. And let me put my face up here too. I guess I should do that. There we go. I guess I should. There I am next to the iceberg. Okay. All right. So I'll play this, and what I'll do is I'll interrupt it and skip that
core
old
of what
stuff.
we're exploring today. Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive.
Right.
And today we're taking a plunge into the fascinating, really intricate world of the unconscious mind. You've provided a fantastic set of materials here.
So they were useful.
Yeah, they trace its origins, explore the major theories, discuss how we might, access it, and ultimately why understanding this fundamental aspect of our psychology is so crucial.
Absolutely. Our mission in this deep dive is to unpack these often complex ideas and really extract the key insights for you. We want you to come away with a clear understanding of how the unconscious mind subtly, and sometimes, quite powerfully, shapes your thoughts, feelings, and daily behaviors, often in ways that might completely surprise you.
It really can be surprising.
Okay, so where do we even begin with this massive topic? It feels huge.
Well, I think a really insightful starting point is to look at the intellectual groundwork, the ideas that paved the way for our modern understanding of the unconscious.
Okay.
It's a common assumption, maybe, that Freud was the first to consider it, but the idea actually has philosophical roots that stretch back quite a bit further.
Oh, interesting. So who was laying the groundwork for this idea before Freud came along and really sort of popped?
All right, so I'm going to skip all this stuff here. So let me try to find something a little bit better here. Skip all the Freud stuff and see if they got
Therapy
modern stuff.
is
here.
crucial
Let's
for
see.
psychological health.
Right, like turning on a light in a dark room to see what's really there. Okay, how did Jung's framework differ then when it came to the structure of the psyche?
Jung viewed the unconscious less explicit.
Yeah, we
It
skipped
involves
that.
conscious thought, it's slower, requires more cognitive resources, and we use it for complex tasks like solving a math problem or making a careful decision.
The effortful thinking.
Right, and what's really striking is that a vast amount of our cognitive processing happens outside our conscious awareness through System 1.
Wow, so most of it is automatic.
A huge chunk of it. And research even indicates that in areas where we have significant experience and get reliable feedback, our System 1 intuitions can actually be surprisingly accurate.
So intuition isn't just random guessing sometimes.
Not necessarily, especially in areas of expertise.
That's a really clear way to think about it, the automatic pilot versus the manual control. Okay, so if so much of what drives us is unconscious, how can we even begin to get a handle on this hidden part of ourselves. How do we access it?
That's a fundamental question, isn't it? Historically, and, well, continuing today, dream analysis has been a significant method.
Right. Freud's thing.
Exactly. Freud famously called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. His idea was that during sleep, our usual psychological
Okay,
defenses are
that's-
lower.
Our guard is down.
Right. Allowing unconscious material,
All right, this
often
is
repressed
nonsense,
wishes.
right? This is
Yeah,
Freud,
it's like
and let's see if
initiating
we
a
can get-
dialogue with your...
Consciously
I'm
think
gonna try
about
to get
every
more
key.
up-to-date stuff
Exactly.
here.
That's a great example of procedural memory, a type of implicit learning, also implicit perception, implicit memory. By paying close attention to our automatic reactions, our gut feelings, our habitual behaviors, we can actually start to glean insights into the unconscious processes that are driving them.
So becoming a better observer of ourselves.
Precisely. It's about becoming a keen observer of your own automatic responses.
Okay, so we have these different avenues: dreams, active imagination, observing implicit cognition to try and understand what's going on beneath the surface. But how do these conscious and unconscious parts of us actually interact on a day-to-day basis? What's that interface like?
Oh, the interaction is constant. It's incredibly dynamic. Unconscious processes are continuously feeding into our conscious experience in countless ways.
Like how?
Well, consider how we automatically categorize people and situations, often based on unconscious biases or past experiences.
Right, snap judgments.
Exactly. Or how emotional responses can arise even before we've consciously registered what's triggering them, that feel before we think phenomenon. Our unconscious also fuels many of our impulsive behaviors, our intuitive judgments, and it's constantly activating and retrieving memories without any conscious effort on our part.
It's doing a lot of work behind the scenes.
A huge amount. As one of your sources mentioned, John Bargh proposed 4 key characteristics of automaticity, which helps understand this:
Okay, what are those?
awareness, intentionality, efficiency, and controllability. Basically, the more automatic a process is, the less aware we are of it, the less intentional it feels, the more efficiently it runs with little effort, and crucially, the harder it is to consciously control or stop once it's initiated.
That makes perfect sense. Like that instinctive jump when you hear sudden loud noise, low awareness, no intention, very efficient, hard to stop.
Exactly like that.
So the unconscious is constantly influencing our conscious experience. What happens when there's a conflict between the two? Or when the unconscious stuff is maybe threatening?
Okay. This was a two-parter. This guy did this as a two-parter. So let me see if I can get to the next part here again.
That's where defense mechanisms come in, right?
Precisely. In Freudian theory, especially, psychological defense
Oh, they're
mechanisms
still talking about Freud here.
can lead
Sorry.
to psychological difficulties or unhelpful patterns repeating over time.
So they're like a mental...
Our brains, particularly areas like the amygdala, can register and react to emotional information even before
You mentioned that feel before we think idea earlier. How does our understanding of the brain, neuroscience, support this interplay between conscious and unconscious?
Modern neuroscience strongly supports this. There's a lot of evidence that emotional processing often begins unconsciously. Our brains, particularly areas like the amygdala, can register and react to emotional information even before it reaches the place of the brain responsible for conscious awareness, like the prefrontal cortex.
So the reaction happens before we even know why.
Often, yes. This explains why we might have that instant gut feeling about someone, or react emotionally to a situation before we've had time to consciously process all the details. And these unconscious emotional responses then significantly influence our subsequent cognitive processes, our decision making, our judgments, how we interact with others. So this unconscious emotional pathway can have a very powerful and immediate impact on our conscious thoughts and behaviors.
Okay, wow. We've explored the history, the theories, how we might access it, this constant interaction. Now, let's get to the really crucial question, I think.
Yeah.
Why does understanding all of this actually matter in our lives? Why is it important to even consider integrating these two aspects of ourselves?
Well, Jung, in particular, really emphasized that achieving psychological wholeness necessitates this integration. It's about bringing the conscious and unconscious aspects of our personality together.
Wholeness, okay.
He viewed that process of individuation we talked about as fundamentally about becoming aware of and integrating previously unconscious content into a more complete sense of self. Without this integration, the unconscious can manifest in problematic ways,
Like how?
like projecting our own unacknowledged qualities, maybe negative ones.
Okay, this is all a bunch of this whole 100-year-old psychology stuff. But they do have a section here where they talk about more
These
modern
previously
research.
unconscious patterns, motivations, unresolved conflicts, we can gain much deeper
Okay.
potentials, resources within ourselves that we weren't even aware we had, things tucked away in that treasure.
Kind of integration.
Another key advantage is increased psychological freedom.
Freedom. How so?
Well, when unconscious processes are operating outside our awareness, they can exert this powerful, almost automatic influence on our lives, right? Limiting our choices, our reactions.
Like being stuck in a loop.
Exactly. As we bring this unconscious content into consciousness, we create a crucial space, a space between a stimulus and our response. We become less reactive, more able to make intentional choices that align with our conscious values and goals, rather than simply being driven by old unconscious patterns.
More.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I don't know. They're not like citing any research or anything in this. There was a section of this. I remember. I listened to this thing ahead of time, and they had a section where they actually had some current research. But yeah, just because you're making something conscious doesn't mean you can control it. You know what I mean? The way you can consciously control your subconscious is to control what gets into your control what you see, control your content. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't even look at the Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? Let's see here. Let me see if I can find it.
Choice, less autopilot.
Precisely. And importantly, integration.
So how are these ideas about the unconscious being applied in practical ways today? You mentioned therapy.
Yeah, in the clinical field, various therapeutic approaches directly engage with the unconscious. Psychodynamic therapies, descendants of Freud and Jung, continue to use techniques like free association and dream analysis to uncover unconscious conflicts.
Still relevant then?
Very much so. But also, mindfulness practices, while not solely focused on the unconscious in the Freudian sense, definitely aim to increase our awareness of automatic thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations.
Noticing the autopilot.
Exactly, which can provide valuable insights into unconscious patterns. Somatic therapies work with the idea that unconscious experiences, especially trauma, can be stored in the body and use physical techniques to access and process them.
Interesting.
Schema therapy focuses on identifying and addressing these early maladaptive patterns or schemas that operate largely unconsciously and drive behavior. And even trauma therapies like EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing can help process unconscious traumatic material that's gotten stuck.
So it remains a really central concept in helping people with a whole range of psychological challenges.
Definitely. The methods evolve, but the core idea persists.
What about in our everyday lives, outside of formal therapy? How can just, understanding the unconscious be beneficial for anyone listening?
Oh, it has a wealth of practical applications. For instance, just by becoming more attuned to our automatic habits, how we react, what we reach for, we can make more conscious choices about how we actually want to behave.
Breaking bad habits, maybe.
Or building better ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Understanding our emotional triggers, those knee-jerk reactions, can significantly improve our ability to manage our emotions more effectively rather than being hijacked by them. Recognizing our potential unconscious biases, we all have them, and can lead to fairer, better decision-making in all aspects of our lives, from work to relationships.
That's huge.
It is. Tapping into the unconscious through practices like mindfulness or journaling, or even just paying attention to our intuition, our dreams, can actually foster and enhance our creativity, accessing different ways of thinking.
Right.
And perhaps most importantly, I think, understanding that many of our motivations and behaviors are rooted in these unconscious processes can cultivate greater self-compassion.
How so?
Well, instead of just judging ourselves harshly for certain reactions or patterns, we can start to understand why they might be there, where they came from. It allows for a kinder, more understanding stance towards ourselves.
That's a really hopeful perspective, that understanding this hidden dimension of ourselves isn't just about digging up problems, but can lead to more kindness towards ourselves and more skillful choices in our daily lives.
I think that's a key takeaway, yes.
And just quickly, what are the current frontiers Where is research heading in this area? What are scientists still actively exploring about the unconscious mind?
Oh, there's a tremendous amount of exciting ongoing research. Neuroscientists are continuing to investigate the neural pathways, trying to map out the brain's intricate flow of information between conscious and unconscious systems.
Looking under the hood.
Exactly. Experimental psychologists are developing increasingly sophisticated methods for studying implicit cognition, uncovering the nuances of automatic processes like bias or learning. There's also a growing interest in developing practical techniques to help us become more aware of these automatic processes in daily life.
And making it more accessible.
Right. Researchers are also examining how cultural and social factors shape our unconscious biases and assumptions. That's a big area. And there's an ongoing effort to integrate insights from all these different psychological traditions, psychodynamic, cognitive neuroscience, into more comprehensive models of the unconscious mind. It's a truly dynamic and constantly evolving field.
It certainly sounds like it. A lot still to learn. So, to bring our deep dive to a close today, it seems really clear that the unconscious mind, far from being just, a passive repository, is this powerful, incredibly active force. It profoundly shapes our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors.
Yeah.
And the process of bringing its contents into conscious awareness through these various means we've discussed really offers us significant opportunities for personal growth, deeper self-understanding, and ultimately, greater psychological freedom.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that there's this rich and complex inner world operating just beneath the surface of our awareness, and that by learning to understand its language, its influence, we can gain a much fuller, more nuanced understanding of ourselves and really our place in the world.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider as we wrap up. Now that you have maybe a glimpse into the depths of your own unconscious, what long-held belief, perhaps, or automatic habit might you feel a sense of curiosity to explore just a little more deeply? What might be operating beneath the surface that, once brought into the light, could offer you a new perspective on yourself and your life? It's definitely something worth reflecting on.
Okay, so all right, so that wasn't exactly academic, but it was, it was just kind of just talking about it, some of the stuff that I was talking about and some of the things and whatever. I think that what I found is that it's like in research, on avant-garde of trying to understand this stuff, they're using this idea of the whole brain, It's your conscious brain and your unconscious brain, and that's who you are, is your whole brain, But the more and more I look at it, and also based on my own introspection that I talked about earlier in this stream, it's your unconscious. Your unconscious is the thing. That's who you are. You everything you do, your decisions, everything. It's your unconscious brain, and your conscious is just there to perform some handy tasks for your unconscious that your conscious brain can do a little bit better than your unconscious, like filtering things and reasoning, and reasoning in a more literal way or whatever, stuff like that, a more explicit way. But basically, what we are is our unconscious brain. That's how we make our decisions. That's how we do everything. It's funny. I got I like to watch on Twitch. Sometimes I watch streamers that are do philosophy and logic and these kind of things, and try to work stuff out logically, and it's like I don't know. I gotta be careful. I don't want to say bad things about people, but it's like, I'll just talk about philosophers in general. Philosophers in general will try to figure out all these things, ethics or morality or whatever, and they'll try to figure out, all these different things. This is what this is the moral decision. This is the decision that we should make. This is the ethical thing we should do, or whatever. And they work it all out, and they go through all these painstaking steps and logic and all this stuff and techniques and history of all the other philosophers, and they come to a decision, The decision says, for example, okay, animals are conscious, animals have brains, animals have rights. We shouldn't treat animals terribly. But then they continue to eat animals. It's like, why? Why did you just go through all that? Why did you just spend 2/3 of your life figuring out all this stuff if you're not going to apply it? If you're just going to ignore the conclusion that you come up with, it's like, when I figure stuff out like that, I try to apply it to my life, and it's hard because you get, especially if you're figuring things out for, if you're one of the early ones, I was like, when I became vegan, it was less than 1% of the population was vegan. So it was difficult. It's hard. It's hard when you're in the minority, such a small minority like that, And just figuring this stuff out. Like, I won't go to a restaurant. I don't want to sit down and have somebody forced to serve me. That just seems so, just a horrible thing to do. You go into a restaurant and sit there and order them to get you some food and bring it to your table. That's just it's immoral. It's not, it's not right. And I try to explain that to somebody today. 499 out of 500 people are going to say that's why would you think that, But when you figure it out, it's a horrible thing to make somebody do that, to say, okay, I'm ordering you to get this food for me, and you got to go in there and somebody in the kitchen is being forced to make the food, and then they're forced to bring it out to you and set it down, and the whole thing is just abhorrent. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing to make people do that, to make people serve you like that. But I don't know. A lot of people, and if you talk to people, and if you think it through, it makes sense. Yeah, that's not good to force people to do stuff being a server in a restaurant is a horrible. It's not a fun job. It's a bad thing to do, and it's not like they're. It's not like they wake up in the morning and say, God, I can't wait to get in there and talk to all these ugly customers and get their food for them. And, people don't want to do that. That's not something people want to do, If people were free to do anything they wanted to do, that wouldn't be something they would want to do. They wouldn't want to go into a restaurant and work in a restaurant and serve people and bring them their food and take their orders and, spend a whole day doing what other people are telling them to do, but they don't have any choice, because if they don't do that, then they don't have a home. They can't eat themselves. They can't, they can't, So it's not voluntary. Is what I'm saying. To have somebody in a situation where they're not voluntarily putting themselves in that situation, maybe they can choose. Okay, I'm going to be I'm going to serve people in a restaurant, or I'm going to scrub toilets, or for whatever reason they don't have a lot of options. But even the options they do have, none of them are good, And it's bad that we have our system set up that way. So, and certainly a lot of people, I imagine a lot of people, don't think that way right now. I'm probably in a minority. They're probably only, a couple percent of the population probably feel that way. Everybody else, they go, well, I like going to a restaurant. I like, sitting down and have somebody serve me, or whatever, whatever it is, and they'll rationalize it. Even people who are, try to do good things and try to figure out what the right thing is to do, and do all that stuff. But if but if you tell them, well, you can't go to a restaurant anymore because that's not good, that's bad, they'll still do it, you know. And I'm like, why? Why are you trying to figure out what's good, what's right and wrong, and be a good person, but still continue to do bad stuff, still kill your fellow Earthlings and eat them, and force people to bring you food and take your orders and do, Uh, anyway, I think it will be more obvious once things get completely automated and we've got robots can do a lot of this stuff that people don't want to do, and we're away from it, and it's a little bit easier to make those choices, stuff like that. We'll be able to see it more. It's hard to see it right now. People don't see that. They don't understand, that it's a lousy situation. It's a bad way to do things. But I think it'll be more apparent, a few more decades out, people will see that we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be forcing people to do our nails and do our hair and bring us our food and do all this stuff. I remember years ago in the South, they used to have this thing, shoe shine stands, where it was almost always black person that would run the shoe shine stand, and people would go and sit on this chair and put their feet down, and then the person would have to kneel in front of them. It was just so demeaning, and shine their shoes for them, and get a dime or whatever, or a quarter for shining their shoes, and that's the only way the person could make their living. And you think about that today. I imagine, I hope that most people see how horrible that is, to force somebody to do that. But also there's economically, there's a huge portion of our economy that's in this whole restaurant and hospitality industry, and so if you bring up the idea that, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore, then those people think, oh, wait a second, if we stop doing this, I won't be able to make this money anymore, and so they'll oppose it, Anyway, where was I? Yeah, talking about the philosophy and why people bother to figure out what to do to figure out what's right and wrong, what's ethical, and go through all these philosophical exercises to figure all this stuff out, if they're just going to ignore the conclusions that come from that, and that's what they do. They ignore them. And I think a lot of it, and that's your unconscious mind, right? Your unconscious has learned that this is traditional, or it's used to doing it this way, or whatever, or you figure out, oh, wait a second, these animals have a conscious experience just like we do, and they have, they feel pain, and they suffer when they're in captivity, and then they get killed, so that people can eat them, that sucks. That's not good. That's immoral. But because it's been done that way for a long time, people just keep doing it, and because there's some people make a lot of money on it, then they continue to try to promote that as the norm. It seems abnormal to me to do that, to make other people suffer, other beings suffer, just because we're used to it or whatever. And there's so many things that we do that are like that. I guess it's always like that, right? You go back 100 years and look at what we did, or 500 years. Some of the horrible things that people did to each other back then. And we progressed a little bit, just that much. Like from Christopher Columbus, right? What we did. I mean, really think about it, right? What Christopher Columbus did, and that whole wave of discovering a new world and slaughtering and doing that genocide to all the people who were here before that, you know. Back then it was like, oh, manifest destiny. Yeah, this is what we're going to do. You know, we're going to kill all these people and take the land, and that's the way it's supposed to be. You know. And today we think how horrible that is, but it's happening right now in front of our eyes. Right now, we got Israel, who's right, that's performing this genocide on the Palestinians and taking their land, you know, doing and killing them and doing all this stuff. And it's like it seems like half. I don't know how many people are either brainwashed or don't understand it or don't care, or who knows. I don't know what they're thinking, why they think that's okay. I don't understand. It just doesn't make any sense to me, you know, how people get their minds twisted, you know. I think maybe it's a lot of it is just people identify with you know, with a certain position, and they get much of their life wrapped up into a certain position, or rooting for a team, you know, like what's going on with the Republicans here, right? They got somebody who is we got a chatter here. Amazon Robinhood says, yeah, 100 years ago, they still had people in zoos. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, 100. I don't know if it was 100 years ago, but yeah, certainly in the 19th century, they had people that were exhibits, put on exhibit. You know, look at this person, this foreign person. You know, and they put him in a cage and put him on exhibit and stuff. Yeah, some of the it's easy. It's easier for us to recognize it, what they were doing in the past. It's more difficult for us to recognize what we're doing here is so horrible, you know. And especially when you have this whole team structure, you know, they've got this whole thing set up where they say, oh, if you're the Republicans are this, the Democrats are that, you know, my team is this or whatever, you know. And the Republicans say this is their team. Their team is Republican, and they're going to root for their team, you know, no matter what. And they get somebody in there doing these horrible things and, you know, just slaughtering our democracy completely. You know, all these things that millions of people have died for in the past, freedom and democracy and all of these, you know, our national creed basically is, you know, freedom. We have the freedom to do this, not, you know, have these rights, the right to speak out without being punished, and the right to, you know, when you're accused, to have due process and all these things. Their guy, right, is getting rid of that and setting up a kingdom, setting up an authoritarian government. But because they have this mindset where, oh, this is my team, I got to do what my team, you know, I got to support my team no matter what. They're like being led around by the nose into this direction that is abhorrent to them, but they don't see it. They've got these blinders on, thinking they're supposed to follow their team. You know, it just doesn't make sense. It just, I don't know. To me, it's pretty crazy. Some of the things that go on. So I think because I'm neurodivergent, and I'm mostly you know, mostly outside of the social system completely. You know, I don't have any friends. I don't have, you know, people don't just pretty much shun me because of who I am. So I'm not invested into that. You know, I'm not invested into trying to do what, you know, be part of a team, or to be, you know, or to make friends, or to have people like me or whatever. I just think, I look at things objectively and say, yeah, this is good, this is bad, you know. It doesn't, and I just say it. You know, and it pisses people off. But what do I care? I'm alone. I don't have any friends anyway. What are they going to do to me? You know, what I'm an old man. I've lived my life. I can do what I want. You know, there's nothing you can do to me at this point. You can't ostracize me. You can't shun me. You know, you put me in prison, great. I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay rent. You know, you can kill me. What? I'm going to be dead anyway, though, real soon. I'm an old man, so I can say whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. I can say the way it is. You know. So yeah, you're not gonna hear this kind of talk too many other places because people are too invested in whatever their thing is. They got to play for their team, or else they'll be kicked off the team, or whatever, you know, whatever the thing is. so I just say what it is. I say it how I call them how I see them. And I have no. There's nothing that is, forcing me into a particular position, in a particular thing, other than what I think is right and wrong, And I try, and as I said earlier, I pretty much have completely stopped watching mainstream media. I don't listen to what politicians say at all. I don't listen to them at all. Or anybody who seems to, anybody like a billionaire, whatever, what's Elon Musk, or any of these billionaires, or any of these people who have huge vested interest in the system. I don't listen to them. I don't listen to anything that they say. When the commercials come on, I don't watch the commercials. I don't listen to any of that. I look at what gets done, what people do, what the politicians do. Are they finding homes for people to live in? Are they feeding people? Are they stopping the wars? Are they, what are they doing? Even if your values are completely different, like the people who are xenophobic, all these xenophobes that want to get rid of the people who are different, get them out of the country, right? Build the wall. That was the whole thing. That was his main thing, and during the first term, right? He had one job. One job was to build the wall, right? That was his job. And now his thing is, all these people came in because we don't have the wall. Well, where's the wall? You said you were going to build the wall. Nobody's asking, even if your views were that way, even if your views were that he was supposed to build the wall to keep the brown people out, right? Even if that was their position, he didn't do that, right? He didn't build the wall. He didn't do any of that stuff. And they're still, well, that's my team. I'm gonna follow whatever he says. It just cracks me up. It's not funny. You shouldn't laugh at it. It's sad. It's sad that they're doing all the horrible things that they're doing. But God, some people are just. Anyway, so that's how the unconscious brain works. People just. They just their unconscious brain is just leads them in a direction, and they're just and it's funny when you try to pin them down too. If you try to ask somebody, you point something out to them, hey, this doesn't quite make sense. They'll either ignore what you're saying and just speak in vague terms. Oh, he's the greatest ever. He's about, whatever. Or they'll make up facts that fit to what their views are, completely disregarding what reality is, It's just, yeah, it's kind of weird. Anyway, so that was about unconscious, how the unconscious brain works, and just some ideas that I had about that. I think that's a better model, is just to say that we are what our minds, what we are, who we are, is our unconscious. That's who we are, and our conscious is just a little clerk that does a few little things for our unconscious brain. So, all right. So I appreciate everybody listening. What am I going to do? Maybe I'll do an IRL stream next time. There was something else I was going to do. Yeah, maybe I'll just do. We have crows around here. My crows that I feed around here. We've got new ones. They finally settled into a group of 4. In the early winter, or midwinter, they kind of mix a little bit, and the groups get rearranged, and they had settled down into 4, and it turned out to be the 4 were 2 couples, and the 2 couples had set up nests, and one of the couples had 2 baby crows, and the other couple had 3 baby crows. So now we got 9 crows in the group. 5 of them are little babies, and I've been taking pictures of those. So maybe next stream or next couple streams, I'll show some of those videos, and we'll talk about it, and I'll explain how the crows live, with how they talk to each other and how their brains work. That'll be fun. All right, so I appreciate everybody coming. I gotta do my public service announcement. Let's see here. Public service announcement. There we go. Everybody, make sure that you wear your N95 mask whenever you go out. And we're speaking about unconscious. You're much more likely to die from going out in public without wearing a mask than you are to die from not wearing a seatbelt. That's what the statistics say. You do the math, that's what it is. You're more likely to die from not wearing an N95 mask than you are to die from not wearing a seatbelt. So please wear your mask when you go outside. The N95 mask has a special filter in it that'll filter out the fine particles that the viruses write on. And it has to say on it N95, has to say NIOSH, and it has this little number here. It has to have straps that go all the way around the back of your head. If it has those little straps that only go behind your ears, that's not an N95 mask. Those are not an N95, and they may not protect you as well. You have to make sure that when you're wearing it, that it makes a seal all the way around your face, all the way around. You can't have any air leaking in anywhere. And you have to wear it every time you're in public, or around anybody. When you're around other people, unless you know that those other people are also wear their mask all the time, right? And if you find yourself in a room or in a situation where you're the only one wearing a mask, and everybody else is not wearing a mask, and maybe you feel embarrassed or you feel pressure or whatever, that's when you really need to wear your mask, because that's the most dangerous part, right? If you're in a place where nobody else is wearing a mask, then that's very dangerous, because it means that they're more likely to be infected, and there's more likely to be virus. So don't get embarrassed to death. That's what I'm saying. Don't let your unconscious brain decide for you. Use your conscious brain to decide that you should be wearing a mask. You should be wearing the N95 mask, not a cloth mask or one of those other masks. Make sure it's an N95 mask. Make sure you wear it all the time. Because even if you're young and you think that you can withstand getting COVID or RSV or the flu or measles, whatever, maybe you take it home to your parents and they're not, and then you would kill them, So just make sure that you wear your mask all the time. That's my public service announcement. Okay. So let's see here. There we go. Okay, I can shut that off. All right. Well, thank you for showing up, and thank you for listening to my little wandering here about the unconscious brain and how that works. And a lot of this is introspection, right? So it's not. I didn't cover a lot of the research and stuff like that, but most of it is kind of pointing in that direction. That it really is our unconscious that's doing everything. So, all right, everybody. I guess that's it. All right, take care. Bye.